I remember the day my world fell apart like it happened just yesterday. My husband Daniel stood in front of me with a smug smile, telling me our marriage was over. But that wasn't all. He had secretly transferred our properties into his name, emptied our joint accounts, and worst of all, manipulated the court to grant him full custody of our twin children. All for a billionaire woman who promised him a life of luxury. They laughed as they walked away, leaving me homeless and broken. 7 years later, I returned to that same courthouse, not as a victim, but as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. And the look on Daniel's face when he realized I was about to take everything from him? That moment was worth every tear I'd shed. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved and trusted, this story of resilience and calculated revenge will resonate with your soul. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell to hear more stories of people who refuse to stay beaten. It was a crisp autumn morning when my life as I knew it ended. The leaves were just beginning to change, painting our neighborhood in warm hues of red and gold. Our twins, Emma and Ethan, had just turned 5, and I had spent the morning decorating cupcakes for their kindergarten class. My name is Alexandra Morgan, though back then I was Alexandra Wells. At 32, I believed I had built a perfect life with Daniel, my college sweetheart and husband of 8 years. We had founded a small but thriving event planning business together in Chicago, purchased a beautiful house in the suburbs, and were raising our beautiful children. At least, that's what I thought we were doing. I was arranging the cupcakes in a container when Daniel walked into the kitchen, dressed in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. "We need to talk," he said, his voice oddly detached. There was something in his eyes I had never seen before, a coldness, a calculation that made my stomach tighten with dread. I set down the spatula I was holding. "What's wrong? Did something happen with that investor meeting?" He laughed, not the warm laugh I had fallen in love with, but something harsh and dismissive. "You could say that. Rebecca Harrington has decided to invest in me personally, not just the business." Rebecca Harrington. The billionaire hotel heiress who had approached us about planning her charity gala. The woman who had insisted on meeting with Daniel alone for the past 3 months. Before I could process what he meant, he continued, his words precise and practiced. "I'm leaving you, Alexandra. Rebecca and I are together now. She's showing me what real ambition looks like, what real success can be." My world tilted on its axis. "What are you talking about? We built this life together. We have children." "Who will be coming with me?" he cut in smoothly. "Rebecca has connections. The best schools, the best opportunities. What can you offer them compared to that?" I stared at him, unable to comprehend how the man I had loved for a decade could transform into this cold stranger. "You can't take our children. This is their home. Our home." His smile then, I'll never forget it. It was the smile of someone who knew they held all the cards. "Actually, it's my home. If you check the deed, you'll find it's solely in my name. Same with the business. As for our accounts." He shrugged. "Emergency funds are important, don't you think? I've been preparing for this day for quite some time." The numbness was setting in, a protective shield against the horror of what he was saying. "That's impossible. We signed everything together. The business was my idea, we started it with my inheritance." "Prove it," he challenged. "Check the paperwork. You signed everything over to me last year. Don't you remember?" I did remember signing documents, dozens of them, that Daniel had assured me were routine renewals for our business licenses, insurance policies, property tax adjustments. I had trusted him completely, never questioning, never reading the fine print. "You can't do this," I whispered, my voice breaking as the magnitude of his betrayal began to sink in. "I already have," he replied, checking his watch casually. "Rebecca's driver will be here in 20 minutes to collect me and the kids. You should pack a bag. My lawyer will be contacting you about the divorce." "The kids are at school," I said automatically, my mind still struggling to process everything. "Not today," he said. "I picked them up early. They're upstairs packing. Rebecca bought them new wardrobes, everything they could possibly need." The betrayal cut deeper. He had planned this meticulously, coordinating even the children's removal from school without my knowledge. "Let me at least say goodbye to them," I pleaded, my pride evaporating in the face of losing my children. For a moment, something like guilt flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that impenetrable mask of indifference. That would only make this harder for everyone. I ran for the stairs, desperate to reach Emma and Ethan, but Daniel caught my arm with surprising strength. Don't make a scene, Alexandra. I've already filed for emergency custody. The papers claim you're unstable, potentially harmful to the children. That's a lie, I gasped, trying to pull away. It's my word against yours, he said calmly. And with Rebecca's resources behind me, whose story do you think the court will believe? A concerned father with a stable home and unlimited resources, or an emotionally unstable mother with nothing to her name? The sound of wheels on hardwood made me look up. A woman I didn't recognize, presumably Rebecca's nanny, was guiding my children down the stairs, each holding a small suitcase. Emma's eyes were red-rimmed, her lower lip trembling. Ethan looked confused and frightened. Mommy? Emma's small voice broke what was left of my heart. I pulled away from Daniel and rushed to them, kneeling to wrap them in my arms. They smelled of strawberry shampoo and that indescribable scent that was uniquely theirs, the scent of home, of love, of everything that mattered. It's going to be okay, I whispered, though I had no idea how that could possibly be true. Mommy loves you so much. That's enough, Daniel said sharply. You're upsetting them. The nanny gently but firmly separated us, guiding the children toward the door despite their confused protests. Emma was crying openly now, reaching back for me. Ethan had gone silent, his small face a mask of confusion and fear. Daddy says we're going on an adventure, Emma said through her tears. But I don't want to go without you. I'll see you soon, I promised, though Daniel's expression told me it was a promise I might not be able to keep. As the nanny led them outside, Daniel lingered in the doorway. You have until tomorrow to vacate the house. It's being listed for sale next week. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I had no money, no assets, no family nearby. My parents had passed away years ago, and my only sister lived overseas. He shrugged, the gesture so casual it burned. That's not my problem anymore. As he turned to leave, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. The back door opened, and I caught a glimpse of a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and an expression of smug triumph. Rebecca Harrington, the billionaire who had decided my husband and children were accessories she wanted to add to her collection. Daniel joined her in the back seat, not looking back as the car pulled away with my children, my life, my everything. I stood in the doorway of what had been my home until the car disappeared from view. Then, slowly, I sank to my knees and finally allowed myself to break. The days that followed passed in a blur of grief and desperate action. I discovered the full extent of Daniel's betrayal. He had indeed transferred all our assets to his name, using forged signatures and falsified documents. Our joint accounts had been drained. The business we had built together was now solely his. Even our wedding photos had been removed from the house, as if to erase any evidence that I had ever been part of this family. I found a lawyer who agreed to hear my case, but without money to pay her, there was little she could do besides offer advice. Document everything, try to find evidence of the fraud, and most importantly, get back on my feet. You need stability if you want any chance of seeing your children again, she told me bluntly. No judge will grant visitation to someone without a home or income. With nowhere else to go, I spent my last $500 on a security deposit for a tiny studio apartment in a part of town I'd never visited before. It was all I could afford. The day before I had to vacate our house, I packed what little was truly mine. My clothes, a few books, my laptop. As I was leaving, I took one last thing, a small clay handprint ornament the twins had made in preschool. It was the only physical reminder I had of them. The first month was the darkest of my life. I applied for jobs frantically, taking anything I could get. By day, I worked as a cashier at a grocery store. At night, I cleaned office buildings. On weekends, I picked up gig work, data entry, food delivery, whatever would bring in a few more dollars. I lived on ramen noodles and discount bread, saving every penny. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. But in those rare quiet moments before exhaustion claimed me, I would hold that clay handprint and whisper to myself, I will rise again. I will get them back. It became my mantra, my promise, my reason to keep going when giving up seemed like the only option. 3 months after Daniel left, I received the divorce papers. The terms were brutal. No alimony, no visitation rights with the children until I could prove mental and financial stability, which the documents defined in terms nearly impossible to meet. Daniel had crafted an airtight case, painting me as an unstable, neglectful mother who had willingly signed away her rights to our shared assets. My court-appointed lawyer advised me to sign. "You can fight this, but without resources, you'll lose and be responsible for his legal fees too," she warned. "Sometimes you have to retreat to fight another day." With a heart full of rage and determination, I signed the papers. Not as an admission of defeat, but as a strategic withdrawal. I would rebuild. I would return. I would reclaim what was mine. That night, something changed in me. The grief that had been my constant companion transformed into something harder, something that could withstand the trials ahead. I made 3 vows to myself. First, I would become financially independent, not just stable, but powerful. Second, I would document every illegal action Daniel had taken to steal my life. Third, I would become the kind of mother my children would be proud of, even from a distance. The next day, I enrolled in online business courses using the public library's computers. I studied during my lunch breaks, on bus rides between jobs, and in the early morning hours before work. I learned about business law, financial management, and digital marketing, skills I had left to Daniel during our marriage. 6 months in, I caught a break. While cleaning offices at night, I overheard 2 executives discussing a problem with their event planning company. Their annual charity gala was in 3 weeks, and the planner had just quit. Without thinking, I stepped into their conversation. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. I used to run an event planning business. I could help." They looked skeptical, and who could blame them? I was wearing a cleaner's uniform, my hands raw from industrial cleaning products. But I had nothing to lose. "Give me 5 minutes to show you what I can do," I pleaded. Those 5 minutes changed everything. I outlined a plan for their gala that addressed every concern they'd mentioned, drawing on my years of experience. They were impressed enough to take a chance on me, offering a contract that paid more than I made in 2 months of cleaning and cashiering. I delivered a flawless event, working around the clock to ensure every detail was perfect. The executives were so pleased they referred me to their colleagues. Suddenly, I had clients, not many, but enough to quit the night cleaning job and focus on rebuilding my career. I called my new business Phoenix Events, a reminder that I was rising from the ashes of my old life. 1 year after Daniel walked out, I had moved to a slightly better apartment, established a small but growing client base, and saved enough to hire a private investigator to track Daniel's activities. I needed to know how my children were doing, and I needed evidence of any illegal actions he might be taking. The PI's reports were both painful and illuminating. Emma and Ethan were enrolled in an exclusive private school, living in a mansion purchased by Rebecca. They seemed physically well cared for, though the PI noted they rarely smiled in public. Daniel was working at Rebecca's family company, having abandoned our event planning business once he had access to greater wealth. Most importantly, the PI discovered that Daniel was careless with paperwork when he thought himself untouchable. He had left digital traces of his fraud, emails to shady lawyers discussing document falsification, bank transfers that didn't match legal records, even messages to associates bragging about how he had upgraded from me to Rebecca. "This is good," said Maria Gonzalez, the new lawyer I had saved up to hire. "But not enough yet. We need more concrete evidence of the fraud, especially regarding the business transfer and the custody arrangement. And you need to be in a stronger position before we challenge him." So I kept building. 2 years became 3. Phoenix Events grew from a one-woman operation to a small team. I moved to a proper office, then a larger one. I diversified, adding corporate training and team-building events to our services. Every extra dollar went into 2 funds, legal fees and evidence gathering. I hired forensic accountants to trace the money trail from our original business. I tracked down former clients who had witnessed Daniel's duplicity. I even found the notary who had supposedly verified my signature on the transfer documents. A notary who, it turned out, had been paid to look the other way. 4 years after losing everything, Phoenix Events had become one of the top event planning companies in Chicago. I had moved to a comfortable condo, built a reputation as a business leader, and amassed enough evidence to bury Daniel 10 times over. But I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. Because something unexpected had happened with Rebecca Harrington. The tabloids were full of rumors. She had grown tired of Daniel, had found a new, younger man to shower with her attention and wealth. Daniel was desperately trying to maintain his position, but his influence was waning. "This is perfect," Maria told me during one of our strategy sessions. If he loses Rebecca's protection, he'll be vulnerable. And if he's desperate, he might make mistakes. So I waited, patient as a spider tending her web. I used intermediaries to leak information to business journalists about questionable practices at Harrington Enterprises, where Daniel now held a VP position. Nothing directly traceable to me, but enough to create scrutiny. And then, 5 years after he had walked out of our home with our children, Daniel made his fatal error. Rebecca had indeed moved on, cutting him off financially though allowing him to keep his position at her company as a courtesy. Desperate to maintain his lifestyle, he began embezzling from Harrington Enterprises, using techniques similar to how he had stolen from our business. The PI brought me the evidence, and I knew it was time. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Maria asked me. "Once we file these papers, there's no going back. This will be all-out war." I looked at the photo on my desk, a school picture of the twins that the PI had obtained. They were 10 now, their faces more mature but still heartbreakingly familiar. Emma had my eyes, Ethan my smile. According to the PI's reports, they asked about me sometimes, despite Daniel's efforts to erase me from their lives. "I've been at war for 5 years, I replied. "It's time he knew it." We filed 3 separate legal actions simultaneously: a petition to reopen the divorce settlement based on new evidence of fraud, a civil suit against Daniel for the theft of my business and assets, and a motion for custody reevaluation. The papers were served to Daniel at his office, a deliberate choice to publicly signal the beginning of his downfall. According to the server, his face had gone from confused to ashen as he read the documents. Within hours, he called Maria's office, demanding to speak to me. She recorded the call, as we had planned. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snarled when I finally took the phone. "Getting justice," I replied calmly. "And my children." He laughed, though it sounded hollow. "With what evidence? What money? You think you can take on me and Rebecca's legal team?" "Rebecca's legal team seems busy with the embezzlement investigation," I said mildly, taking satisfaction in his sharp intake of breath. "As for evidence, you should check your email. I've sent a small sample." I had indeed sent him copies of some of the least damaging evidence, just enough to let him know how thoroughly I had documented his crimes. "This is nothing," he blustered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Fabricated documents won't hold up in court." "Then I guess we'll see each other in court," I replied and hung up. What followed was 6 months of intense legal battles. Daniel threw everything he had at me: character assassination, technical challenges to the evidence, attempts to intimidate my witnesses. But he was fighting a losing battle, and deep down, he knew it. The case made local headlines: event planning mogul battles ex-husband for justice. The business community, which had come to respect Phoenix events, rallied behind me. Former clients came forward with testimonials about how I had been the real talent behind our original company. Most devastating for Daniel was Rebecca's response. Rather than supporting him, she distanced herself completely, focusing on the embezzlement investigation at her company. Without her resources, he began to crumble. 3 weeks before the final hearing, Maria called me with news that made my heart race. "The custody evaluator's report came in. It's better than we could have hoped. The children have consistently asked about you over the years." The school counselor documented their questions. And most importantly, Emma kept a journal. "She wrote letters to you that she never sent." Tears filled my eyes. "They remembered me. More than that," Maria said gently. "They missed you. And the evaluator is recommending immediate visitation, with a path to shared custody." The reunion with Emma and Ethan was scheduled for a controlled environment with a child psychologist present. I arrived an hour early, too nervous to sit still. I had brought small gifts, nothing extravagant, just thoughtful items that reflected what I remembered of their personalities. For Emma, a journal with constellation patterns on the cover, recalling her childhood fascination with stars. For Ethan, a model building kit, honoring his love of creating things. When they walked in, my breath caught. They were so much taller, so different, yet unmistakably my children. Emma had her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes, my eyes, serious and assessing. Ethan's hair was shorter than I remembered, his frame lankier, but his cautious smile was achingly familiar. They stood in the doorway, uncertain. "Hi," I said softly, my rehearsed speech evaporating. Emma stepped forward first, her voice steady though her hands trembled. Dad said you left us. That you didn't want us anymore. The accusation pierced me like a physical wound. That was never true, I said. Not for a single moment. I have fought every day to get back to you. Then why didn't you visit? Why didn't you call? Ethan's voice cracked slightly. Your father wouldn't allow it, I explained carefully, mindful of the psychologist's presence. There were legal issues that prevented me from contacting you. But I never stopped trying. I never stopped loving you. Show us, Emma challenged, her young face fierce with a mix of hope and doubt. I opened my phone to the photo gallery I had prepared. There were pictures of my apartment with their rooms ready and waiting, rooms I had prepared years ago, updating the decor as they would have aged. There were images of files full of legal paperwork, physical evidence of my fight for them. And there was a photo of my desk at work, where their school picture had pride of place. Every birthday, every Christmas, every important day, I bought you gifts, I told them, emotion making my voice hoarse. I kept them all, hoping someday I could give them to you. Ethan took a tentative step closer. Dad said you were sick. That you couldn't take care of us. I think you're old enough now to understand that sometimes, people tell lies because it's easier than telling the truth, I said carefully. I was never sick. I never stopped wanting to be your mom. Emma's composure broke first. I knew it, she whispered, and then she was in my arms, her body shaking with sobs. Ethan followed a moment later, his embrace tentative at first, then fierce. I held them as they cried, as I cried, years of separation distilling into a moment of reunion that no legal victory could ever match. The final hearing arrived on a snowy December morning. The courtroom was packed, journalists, business associates, even some of Daniel's former friends who had turned against him as his true nature was revealed. Daniel sat at the defendant's table, a shadow of his former self. Without Rebecca's financial support and with his reputation in tatters, he looked deflated. His attorney, not the high-powered legal team he once commanded, but a court-appointed lawyer, shuffled papers nervously. The judge's ruling was comprehensive and devastating for Daniel. The divorce settlement was invalidated due to clear evidence of fraud. All assets transferred under false pretenses were to be returned to me, with interest. The business valuation showed that Phoenix Events had far surpassed our original company's worth, so I was awarded additional damages. Most importantly, the custody arrangement was overturned. The children would transition to living primarily with me, with Daniel granted supervised visitation pending completion of parenting classes and therapy. But the judge wasn't finished. Given the evidence of document falsification, identity theft, and financial fraud, this court is referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Mr. Wells, you may want to consult with a criminal defense attorney. Daniel's face went completely white. This was the moment I had worked toward for 7 years. Seeing him understand that his actions had consequences, that the life he had stolen was being reclaimed. As the court adjourned, he approached me, his former arrogance replaced by desperate pleading. Alexandra, you can't do this. Think of the children. They need their father. I am thinking of the children, I replied calmly. They need to see that truth and justice matter. That no one, not even their father, is above the law. I'll lose everything, he whispered. Now you know how it feels, I said, not with malice but with the quiet conviction of someone who had walked through that fire and emerged stronger. As I turned to leave, Emma and Ethan waiting for me by the door with their court-appointed guardian, Daniel called after me one last time. I'm sorry, he said, the words seemingly wrenched from some long-buried place of honesty. I don't expect forgiveness. But I am sorry. I paused, considering his words. Apologies are measured by actions, not words, I finally replied. If you're truly sorry, show it by being honest with the children from now on. They deserve that much. I walked away, joining Emma and Ethan as we left the courthouse together. Outside, snow was falling gently, covering the city in a blanket of white, a clean slate, a fresh beginning. Is it over? Emma asked, her gloved hand tight in mine. The hard part is, I assured her. Now we get to the good part, being a family again. What about Dad? Ethan's voice was small but steady. I knelt down, meeting his eyes. Your father made some very bad choices. He has consequences to face. But he's still your dad, and it's okay to love him and be sad about what's happening. And you? Emma asked. Are you sad about him? I considered the question carefully. I'm sad about what happened, about the time we lost. But I'm not sad about where we are now. We found our way back to each other. That's what matters most. As we walked to the car, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 7 years ago, I had been broken, penniless, and alone. Today, I was whole, scarred, certainly, but stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. Daniel would face justice for his crimes. I would rebuild my relationship with my children. And Phoenix events would continue to rise, a testament to the power of resilience. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about rebuilding yourself so thoroughly that when they finally face the consequences of their actions, you're already soaring too high to be pulled down with them. As we drove home, truly home, for the first time in 7 years, I glanced in the rearview mirror at Emma and Ethan. They were looking out the windows, their expressions thoughtful but peaceful. They had questions, doubts, and healing ahead of them. We all did. But we would face it together. And that, more than any legal victory or financial restitution, was the true meaning of justice. If this story of resilience and justice moved you, please hit the like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories of remarkable comebacks and sweet revenge. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone who's still in the darkness to keep fighting for their own dawn.